Well, good morning, Heritage Church. Good morning. It is so wonderful to be with you. I consider it an honor and a privilege to join you this morning. Over the past few years, through my friendship with Brock, I've heard a lot about you. I've heard a lot about this church family and all the good that you are doing within your community. And so it's exciting for me to finally get the chance to meet you. Brock shares wonderful things about all of the good work that is going on here. I know that you guys are probably well aware, but I just want you to know how blessed you are to have Brock and his family serving here at Heritage. Many of you, yeah. I know that many of you have known Brock a lot longer than I have, but he's become one of my most trusted friends and confidants in ministry. Whenever I spend time with him, he makes me want to be a better minister. He makes me want to be a better person. And I'm confident that you all see that in him too. So Brock, thank you for the opportunity to share a word with your beloved family this morning. So I want to share with you a little bit about myself this morning and how I came to be where I am. And I know that Brock kind of introduced some of that this morning as well. But I want to say it's not because I'm important, but because I believe the one who has been leading me to where I am is important. So I was born and raised in this small town near Fresno, California, Central California. Fresno is the closest big city to us. That's our big city that we go to. It's a very agricultural area, and I have the privilege of serving in ministry at what I consider to be my home church. I get to preach and teach to the people that played a pivotal role in showing me the love of Jesus and teaching me to love Jesus myself. And I love them dearly. And I love the community in which I serve as well. A big part of my story of faith and something that drives my own practice of faith, how I live it out, is that I didn't grow up in church. Faith and the exercise of it within community and through living a life devoted to Jesus, these were pretty foreign concepts to me growing up. So much of my childhood was marked by a lot of brokenness, adverse childhood experiences, as psychologists call them. The effects of broken relationships, addiction, poverty, domestic situations that were less than ideal, food insecurity, as Marty talked about earlier, even a period of homelessness. These were all things that I knew from a young age within my family. And to me, they were just what I considered to be the norm. And so far removed from my day-to-day experience, my experience just in daily life was anything to do with a life that was lived in faith and faithfulness to Christ, which I now realize was probably related to the adversity that I faced growing up. Faith in Jesus just really wasn't on my radar. So, how did I end up here? Not only seeking to grow in following Jesus myself, but encouraging others regularly to do so as well. Well, there's a moment in my life that I can point to and say, my life was changed forever from that point forward. And it was this strange mixture of kind of just deep awareness of my brokenness, some intellectual and spiritual searching and seeking within my heart, some emotional heaviness, and a softening of heart to desire to grow closer to the God that I believed existed, but suddenly desired to know. And I experienced Jesus' immense love and embrace in the midst of the severe brokenness in which I was living. And everything changed. And I want to say that when I say everything changed, I don't mean that all of the adversity or its profound effect on me just suddenly vanished. That's not the case at all. My wife, who has studied child development, and she works as an assistant director of a child care facility in our area, which serves low-income families, she reminds me often that the environment in which children grow up and the adversity that they face as a result of that environment stays with a person, especially underneath the surface throughout the rest of their life. But it is possible to face adversity and to build resilience and for healing to occur. And in my life, all of that started when I encountered Jesus. So there's a story from the life of Jesus that I want to share with you this morning, because I think that in it, there's a call for each one of us, no matter where we are in our walk with God, no matter how much or how little adversity we've faced. The story is found in a few places in the New Testament, but I'd like for us to look at it together in the Gospel of Mark. The Gospels are sort of biographies of the life of Jesus. All four of them, the first four books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they tell us about real encounters that people had with Jesus some 2,000 years ago. And they're all meant to instill in those who read them a life of faith in and faithfulness to Jesus. And so Mark is writing to people who are living some couple decades after Jesus' death, and he's telling them these stories from Jesus' life in order to encourage them to keep going with their faith, keep going in their walk with God, or to encourage them to start walking with God if they haven't taken that step yet. So Mark writes in Mark chapter 5, "They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." Now, I know that this is a pretty bizarre start to a story. There's a lot mentioned in those few verses that's foreign to us. A man with immense strength who is possessed by an impure spirit, living among tombs on the other side of a lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And while there are people who are a lot smarter than I am, who've said many wonderful things about each of those details, I just want to boil it down to one observation. This man is suffering from immense brokenness. He's suffering from immense brokenness. He's not in a good headspace. He's dealing with inner turmoil. He's experienced being cut off from community. He's dealt with physical pain and self-destructive tendencies. He's hurting physically, relationally, spiritually. And one of the interesting things about the Gospels is that as you read about Jesus' life, you learn that this kind of place is the precise place where you'd expect to find Jesus. Jesus is often found in the place of greatest suffering. So the story in Mark continues. This suffering man runs up to encounter Jesus, and encounter him he does. And just to summarize a bit of what comes next, Jesus speaks directly to the source of his suffering. And there's this exchange that takes place between this impure spirit, which turns out to be a whole host of demons, and Jesus. And Jesus drives out the forces of evil that have been plaguing this man, causing him so much pain and suffering. And it's really kind of an interesting part of the story, because in their conversation, Jesus agrees to let this host of demons enter a nearby herd of pigs. And when they do, the whole herd rushes off the edge of a cliff into the lake and are drowned. So even demon-possessed pigs can't fly. But it becomes clear that this was the intent of those evil forces within the man's life. He likely would have met the same fate had he not encountered Jesus. So let's pick the story back up in verse 14. Mark chapter 5, verse 14. We read this. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. I love this story because I think it says some important things about who Jesus is and what he's all about. One of the things that it tells us is that Jesus is more powerful than the forces of evil that seek to control. The impure spirit in this story, which is representative of all those forces of evil that would seek to lead us away from God's intention for our lives, seeks control. This man appeared to be beyond help, the brokenness too immense. People from the town even chained him up, but he broke out of that. The evil that he faces controls his life, his very being. And yet, Jesus exerts his power over that destructive force and proves to be much more powerful. So I have a 6-year-old boy by the name of Hayden, and Hayden is in that stage of asking all the questions about superlatives. He wants to know what's the fastest and the biggest and the strongest. And he asks these questions all the time. Daddy, what's the biggest? Whatever. What's the strongest? Whatever. What's the fastest? Whatever. He wants to know that about everything. And I've never said, well, I don't know, as much as I have here recently. But the other day he switched it up. I guess I told him I don't know too many times, and he switched it up, and now he asks, what's the fastest or biggest or strongest, whatever it is, that you know? And I thought, oh man, now I really got to think, you know? One of the things that we're meant to take away from this story is that Jesus is the strongest entity that we know. stronger than any of the forces of evil, than any of the forces of brokenness that we face in life. We also learn that Jesus brings healing to broken people and broken situations. See, part of Jesus being stronger is his ability to restore our brokenness. So in my first day of third grade, that was quite a while ago for me, on my first day of third grade, I got in trouble. And the trouble stemmed from the fact that as my teacher went around the room asking us all our names, I told her that my name was not Toby, but Rocky. That was not a nickname for me growing up. But she double-checked and triple-checked her roll sheet, and there was no Rocky on it. And she was kind of frantic about it, called the office, And I've got to tell you, the year of the first day of third grade for me was 1992, and I had just watched what was, at that time in my life, my favorite movie. The movie is Three Ninjas. It's a classic, if you haven't seen it. And Rocky was the name of the oldest brother in this movie. And I'm pretty sure that that's why I chose Rocky to tell to my teacher to say that was my name. I don't know what caused me to do it, but here's what I think. Here's what I realize now. All I knew at that time in my life, with all of the chaos going on at home, with all of the brokenness in my life, was that I didn't want to be Toby. And yet, I stand here today as one who has experienced healing from the brokenness. There's still brokenness, and there's still healing that needs to occur. But I have found no better person to turn to than Jesus. Finally, we learn that Jesus calls people who have encountered his healing power to share that mercy with others. It's a bit strange at first glance that Jesus doesn't allow the man who's been healed to go with him. This man wants to follow Jesus. He wants to get in the boat with him and go where he goes. But Jesus tells him to stay and to tell his people about the mercy that he has experienced. And I think the thing that we're meant to take away from that is that Jesus calls us, if we have come to know his mercy and grace, to extend that mercy and grace to those around us, to those within our sphere of influence, to those that we come in contact with on a daily basis. Imagine this man's life after this encounter. He stays put within his community, and everybody knows that he is an example of a changed life. He's rooted both in the mercy of Jesus and in the community that Jesus has called him to. The last year, my family and I got to take a vacation up to the north coast of California. It's a beautiful area. Having grown up in California, I had never seen the coastal redwoods. I'd seen the giant sequoias in like Yosemite National Park and Sequoia National Park, but never been up to the coastal redwoods. And part of our vacation involved a train ride through the redwood forest. And I learned something pretty cool about these trees. This particular forest was a popular place for logging back in the day. And so as you ride along, you see all of these stumps of redwood trees that were cut down for logging purposes. But around those stumps, you also see multiple other redwoods growing up, something that gets referred to as fairy rings. It's a circle of trees surrounding a stump. It's a strange sight. But what I learned was that when a redwood tree gets cut down, its root system remains alive. And it begins to sprout new trees. And they grow up like this in a circle around that stump, sprouting from the roots of a chopped down tree. New life growing from the established root system of a dead tree. And as I read this call from Jesus to this man who's known severe suffering, this call to return to his people, those within his sphere of influence, and to share with them the mercy that he's experienced, I can't help but think about these majestical trees sprouting from the root system of another. Beauty growing out of brokenness. Mercy being extended in a way that brings new life. So I love this story in Mark 5 for a lot of reasons. And I know that it's kind of bizarre. There's a lot that may need to be translated to help us understand their first century context. But at its heart, it's a story about brokenness and suffering and healing. And I don't know about you, but that's my story. Not just my story from my childhood till now, but that's my story every day. Finding healing from the suffering that comes about from brokenness. So the other night, my kids were talking about their favorite stories in their children's Bible, and my 8-year-old daughter asked me, "Daddy, what is the story where Jesus goes to the cross, is that called the Last Supper?" And I kind of chuckled because I could tell she was thinking of the Last Supper, where Jesus eats with his followers before his death. But I thought, as I got to thinking about it, I thought, that's actually a pretty good name for it, for Jesus dying on the cross. Not because suffering is no longer present, but because Jesus knows the depths of human suffering, that whatever suffering we might experience, he can identify with us. And the great hope that we have is that God invites us to identify with him in his resurrection, to experience new life. So I don't presume to know the suffering that you've faced or are facing. We all experience brokenness in different ways. But what I do know is that Jesus is often found in the place of greatest suffering. And he's working to bring healing out of the brokenness.
All right, y'all. So now we are going to move into the part of our service where we get to serve. But I want to first take a second and let you notice that there are some little sheets of paper all around you. We put them on kind of every like 3 chairs so that you could see a lot of the things that Toby talked about. As our duty is to extend the grace and mercy that we've been shown to others, we are actively, as a church, Heritage is all about doing those things. And there's a list of all kinds of things on that sheet that we wanted to kind of point out that we are currently involved in doing.
Yeah, I'd like to highlight a couple of them just really quickly. The first one I'd like to highlight is That Was Me Kids. This is a fairly new ministry for Heritage, but it's really, truly an amazing one. We have a contact that is one of the head counselors in Keller ISD, and she kind of has an umbrella of several schools that are under her. And the counselors from each of those schools identify children that are food insecure and that need additional food, just so they have food in their pantry. And so our commitment as a church right now is to take 50 of those children. There are about 100 in the district, and nobody else is doing this. And so we want to grow that and get it to where really as many children can get food as possible. And so what we do is we fill these bags, and it's got simple things in it like soup and ramen noodles and cereal and protein bars, or things that they need to eat for the weekend. And so the way that we've kind of changed this over the last couple of months is made it to where we can actually now sponsor a child. And to sponsor a child, it's about $20 a month, and that pays for everything that goes in the backpack, and that pays for about 2 days worth of food. And so we would love it if you guys wanted to partner with that. We have a QR code on the sheet that you can actually scan to sign up to sponsor a child. And so that's one of them. And of course, you know, being a kid or working with children, this one is really important to me. And honestly, I was this kid when I was a kid. Our pantry wasn't full. And so it means a lot to me that we're doing this for kids that are real children in our neighborhoods. The next one that I want to point out is the coat drive. Starting at the beginning of November, we're going to start collecting coats. And if they're child-sized coats, they're going to go to these kids. If they're adult-sized coats, then they're going to go downtown to the That Was Me ministry, to homeless people that are in our city, just to help them stay warm over the summer or over the winter.
And then we also want you to know there's a table out in the back where we're going to be moving from this week into next week and going to be doing a blood drive. And so you can sign up for a time where you can give blood next week as well if you want to do that ahead of time. But right now we are moving into the one that's on the top of that sheet, and that is Feed the Need. And so this is going to be where we're packing a ton of boxes that are going to go into our community. And so we are going to have a few different stations, including, like, we need people to just start stacking the chairs that you're currently sitting in. We've also got a couple of tables in the back for those of you that may not be as mobile as others. If you want to just take your chair and go sit around those tables, we've got cards and pens and stuff where you can mark down all kinds of different notes and stuff that will go in the boxes. We want everybody of all generations to be part of what we're doing as we actively build God's kingdom here. And Amy's going to talk about a couple of the other stations.
Okay, so for kind of logistics, we would like to get 2 stacks of chairs, one on this side and one on that side, because the kids actually put the box on the chair and push it down the hallway. And then each table has signs on it showing what exactly, like it might be 2 cans of corn, 2 cans of green beans, 1 can of yams. With those, it would really be helpful if we had adults just standing at the table, making sure that what's supposed to be going in the boxes goes in the boxes. Because kids sometimes tend to put their favorite things in the boxes rather than like all the stuff in the boxes.
Really like marshmallows.
Yes. So if adults could kind of monitor that and then kids could fill the boxes, that would be great. We'll also need a couple of adults just to tape together boxes and get them prepared for the kids. And then just breaking down this room to get ready for the Pumpkin Carnival tonight, which we haven't talked much about the Pumpkin Carnival today, but that's something that everybody is invited to. We're going to have meals for everyone. Hopefully you've signed up. Hopefully we'll get a little extra food if you haven't. But we'll have hamburger or hot dog meals for everybody that comes, and that's from 5 to 7. So we're getting ready for this. That, and all month long, we've been passing out flyers in the pumpkin patch and have a lot of the community that's coming tonight to join us. And so it's a great time for us as a church to just embrace our community and have a fun meal together and just a fun pumpkin-y time together. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think we are ready. So if we could just get 2 stacks of chairs, one out on this side, one on this side, and then Miss Amy Jo's going to be on this side kind of overseeing things. Angela's going to be on that side. If you're not able to do a whole lot of mobile things, or if you have really little kids, you guys can just go to the back and write cards to go in these boxes.
And break. Let's do it.